Sir, you just gone live.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the next webinar under the Storage Handling Knowledge series. As you are aware by now, since more than a year, we bring to you contemporary topics in the material handling domain, and we have covered various topics so far, starting from basic concepts in material handling equipment, different types of material handling equipment, batteries, chargers, order picking applications, and also about various maintenance practices, safety features. We have covered various aspects of material handling equipment. Today, we bring to you another very important topic, which very interestingly is never discussed whenever any requirement of material handling equipment is discussed with customers. Though this is one of the key component of any powered material handling equipment, the controller. Yes, so any parameter setting, any feature setting, any performances that you derive out of a electrical powered equipment is all because of controller. And we can very rightly say that this is the heart of the equipment. So we thought it is prudent now that we have a very thriving community who comes on this platform regularly to gain more and more knowledge about this material handling and storage domain. We thought it's prudent that let us go a bit one step deeper inside the equipment and start looking at what are the important componentries which drive these equipment. So today we have a very eminent speaker and I can say a complete master on this subject. We have Mr. Anuj Desai. He has 22 years plus experience in exactly the same domain. He is the working as in the capacity of technical director in Curtis Instrumentation, and he is responsible for anything and everything related to technical, and he works very closely with OEMs to develop various functionalities of these controllers. We could not have had a better speaker to speak on this topic. Now, just a sort of a context setting, controllers cannot be discussed without discussing about motors. So Mr. Anuj, maybe while going through his presentation, would be starting his discussion with motors so that audience gets an understanding of the basis from where he will take over what all controllers can do in a material handling equipment. Before I hand over to Mr. Desai, I would request all the audience to post their questions in the Q&A section of this platform. And please put your name rather than posting the question anonymously so that in case any questions remain unanswered due to paucity of time, we are able to reach back to you post the event. And one more request, uh, post the event, there will be a feedback form, the link of which will be shared in the Q&A window. We would request you to please share your feedback by filling that form and let us know if you want us to cover any more topics. And of course, let us know your feedback about the session that we are handling today. With that, I would request Mr. Anuj Desai to come on board and take us through this important topic. Just a small sort of a pointer here. Mr. Desai would not be able to put his video on because of bandwidth issue in his area. And I think we can appreciate that part. I mean, we can well understand with everybody working from home. These are the digital challenges that we may have to go through. But his voice, his presentation, I think it would be clearly audible and viewable by all. With that, Mr. Desai, it's all yours.
Hello. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Mr. Desai.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Abhishek, and for putting in such a wonderful introductory lines. I am Anuj Desai. Hello, everybody. I am Anuj Desai on behalf of Curtis Instruments. The name Curtis doesn't need any introduction, so I will just start with the presentation straight away. Okay.
Sure, Mr. Desai, you can proceed.
Yeah. So the presentation today is about the electric vehicle motor technologies and the role of the controller, the motor controller. So there are various types of motors which are in the use in the conventional material handling equipment. For the battery powered electric vehicle traction applications, the motor types that are in use are DC series wound motors, DC separately excited motors. They are also called shunt motors. SEPEX is Curtis' patented name, which means the separately excited, where you have different armature and different field windings separately excited and controlled. Then DC permanent magnet motors, which are also called PMDC motors. These are all brush motors. The first three are brush motors. They have got the brushes and the commutators. Whereas the AC induction motor is the one of the oldest workhorses as far as the motor technology is concerned, and it does not have the brushes. It is asynchronous type of motor where the speed of the rotor is always lower than the speed of the stator by a variable which is called the slip. Without slip, the motor just can't run. Then permanent magnet AC motors are the latest in technology, which have started making their foray into material handling segment of late. These are synchronous motors which employ the magnet. So they're yet to find their way, at least in Indian material handling equipment, but they're slated to start replacing AC induction motor in the coming future. Then the brushless DC, which is nothing but the inside out PMDC motor with brushes eliminated, and it is again a AC motor, but not exactly the sinusoidally controlled AC motor, but trapezoidal motor, low cost, lower end, and good enough for very low end applications, cost effective applications up to 1 or 2 kilowatts power rating maximum. And then there are different motor types which are not even used on other electric vehicle segments, like synchronous reluctance motors or switch reluctance motor, because of the inherent limitations, some disadvantages of controlling those motors and the torque ripples at a very low speed of the motor shaft. So the brushless motors are essentially, three-phase motors, uh, barring a few exceptional cases where you have polyphase motors. But the three-phase motors are mostly in the electric vehicle segments, in which there are two categories, synchronous and asynchronous. In synchronous motors, the rotor and the stator. Stator is the stationary winding. Rotor is the armature, which is spinning, which is a moving part of the motor. So they are basically speed locked. They are running at the synchronous speed. So the rotor is always following the stator speed. It has to be in synchronized with the stator field because of the magnets and the construction and the technology of the motor. And in synchronous motors, there are two subcategories which are called PMAC, that is permanent magnet synchronous motors, and brushless DC motors. Then in the asynchronous, we have got AC induction motor, as we discussed just now. So AC induction motors are most commonly used in the material handling equipment, as you can see in the bracket. This is a further subdivision of the electric motors in DC motors and AC motors category. So it is nothing but similar to the previous slide. In AC induction motor, which is a asynchronous motor, we have two further subcategories, which are squirrel cage type of design and the wound rotor type of design. Wound rotor design is not very common in even in the static industrial applications because of some uh, disadvantages compared to the squirrel cage design. So squirrel cage design is very common. In fact, in the electric vehicles, only the squirrel cage design with three-phase delta connected motors is used. We will talk about the advantages that the AC induction motor offers, AC induction motor technology. It's higher. It has got higher efficiency than the corresponding DC motors, brush motors. It does not have any commutator or any brushes, so those losses in terms of the friction and the passage of the electric current from one conductor to another are eliminated. It is simple. I think I will say it is most simple and the most inexpensive construction that comes with the AC induction motor as an advantage. Very easy to mass produce with identical characteristics. No brushes means very low maintenance, because the brushes and the commutator are the most maintenance heavy parts of a brush electric motor. Because there are no brushes, there are very low electromagnetic emissions. Because of the above points, it is very easy to hermetically seal the motor and offer you the ingress protection starting from 65 and higher. Any kind of failure mode on the vehicle, either a short circuit in the motor or a controller or a power cable, any kind of short circuit or any disaster, any fire. So it will definitely ensure a fail-safe shutdown of the vehicle. It has got the widest torque versus speed characteristic curve compared to the corresponding DC motors like series separately excited and PMDC motors. It does require quadrature encoder feedback, that is the position feedback of the rotor from the motor shaft. It has got regenerative braking from the max speed up down to the zero speed. It has got the regenerative braking as well as because of the regenerative braking, it is possible to avoid to control the rollback on a slope when the vehicle is standing stationary without engaging the parking brake or a foot brake. That's a safety aspect. As I said, AC induction motors are very easy to construct compared to other motors. So basically, because this is an example showing the squirrel cage rotor. Why it is called squirrel cage? Because it is reminiscent of the squirrel cage. Basically, if you look at it, the appearance wise. So it is basically a laminated core, iron core with copper or aluminum bars, which are short-circuited at the end by the slip rings. And the aluminum bars are most commonly used because of the cost effectiveness that it offers. But there are certain applications in which even copper bars are used where the very high efficiency is required and the lower losses are required. They are called AC motors, typically AC induction motors, asynchronous motors, or squirrel cage motors. They're referred by different names in the industry. Typically, the motor, AC induction motor or any kind of AC motor is controlled by a 6 MOSFET, 6 transistorized bridge, which inverts. Basically, it is called inverter also. This diagram shows that you are inverting a DC voltage into 3-phase sinusoidal AC waveform. We will go to the next slide for a better understanding. This is your controller and the motor. What exactly is inside the controller is shown in a block diagrammatic form. You have got a system microprocessor. There is another microprocessor in the system, which is called supervisory microprocessor, to offer that redundant, safety advantages as demanded by the European safety regulations. But this is the main microprocessor. Then you have got a logic circuit, which controls the gate drive of all the MOSFETs, 6 MOSFETs. Then you have got a battery, the main contactor, which is a switch gear, electromechanical. Then you have got a internal filter capacitor bank, which is named as power capacitor array. Then 6 MOSFETs bridge, 3-phase output, and the current sensors fitted on the 2 phases. Third phase does not require a current sensor because the current can be estimated from the 2 phases. And the motor should have a quadrature encoder to give the position feedback, RPM, and the direction of rotation of shaft, that feedback. So you can see the two waveforms, square wave waveforms coming back from the encoder, which are 90 degrees phase apart. So here you can see the two waveforms coming from the encoder, blue and black. So you can see there is a 90 degrees phase difference. Those are called phase A and phase B. If phase A is leading, controller understands that the shaft is spinning in one particular direction, say clockwise. That might mean a forward direction of a motor, the vehicle. If the phase B is leading compared to the black waveform coming ahead of the blue waveform, it will mean the motor is spinning in the opposite direction, that is in the reverse direction of the vehicle. So they are transformed into the sinusoidal AC input inside the controller's encoder input processing circuitry, which converts digital into, there is a D2A circuit inside the logic board. Basically, what you are going to get from using the encoder, shaft encoder on a AC induction motor is the speed of the shaft and the direction it is spinning in. Output waveform of the motor going to the motor from the inverter, which is converted from battery power, which is a DC power, will look like this because it is a pulse width modulated waveform, but basically smoothened out with the help of the filter capacitors. And so there are very low, very low harmonic distortion and the ripples on the waveform. So you can see the waveform on bottom left is the current waveform, which is looks like switching, but it's not exactly smooth, but not even too many fluctuations in the current waveform. So the 3-phase waveform on the right hand side, U, V, and W, all phases 120 degrees apart from each other. AC induction motor offers the best possible, as we spoke earlier, the best possible torque speed characteristics. So yellow is the curve which you get by using a AC induction motor in combination with a good controller, a well-tuned controller, a good technology controller. There are two regions in terms of operation of a AC induction motor. So the base speed is the point which is marked here midway somewhere, is the point from where the torque starts reducing. We start defluxing the motor. So the torque starts falling down because At this point, the voltage, the applied voltage, the RMS voltage has risen to the maximum rating available from the battery. Suppose your battery is 100 volts, then you get up to by square root to 64 volts max voltage has reached in the first region, which is called constant torque region, constant power region, where voltage and frequency are chasing each other. The ratio is common. And beyond this point, the base point, the voltage is held constant because it has reached its maximum value. Only the frequency goes on increasing, which gives you a higher speed beyond the base speed at the cost of the torque, which is called constant power region. The first region is called constant torque or constant flux region, region up to the base speed. Above the base speed, the power is constant, torque reducing. The Curtis controllers, the controllers that we supply, have a special, very good and special feature that it allows the motors as induction motors to be characterized on the vehicle. We call it auto characterization. Most of you may be aware. So this this curve shows how the motor auto characterization is done and how the different sleep frequencies are sweep through the stator to understand the motor characteristics and the one moment, I think. So with the Curtis AC controller, which controls the voltage, frequency, current, and the sleep of the motor output, an envelope of multiple speed curves is created to obtain the maximum torque per ampere and the efficiency. That's why our controllers are the most efficient globally at any load and any speed. The torque availability, of course, reduces beyond the base speed because of the the characteristic of the motor. This slide shows the permanent magnet AC motors versus brushless DC motors versus AC induction motors. Basic differences. The PMAG, that is permanent magnet DC motors, and the brushless DC motors, both employ the magnets. They're different. There are two different types of permanent magnet synchronous motors. They are synchronous motors where speed and the rotor and the stator speeds are the same. They also have three-phase status, just like AC induction motor. Key difference is, as I said, they are synchronous because the frequency of rotation of stator and the stator, electric field and the rotor mechanical motion are the same. Induction motors are asynchronous. The frequency of rotor is slower than that of the stator's magnetic field. It has to be slower, otherwise it just can't spin. The difference between the two, that is stator rotating magnetic field and the rotor actual mechanical speed, is called slip. If there is no slip, there is no torque, so motor can't spin. The key mechanical difference lies in the construction of the rotor. The rotor design is same, is different basically. So that's where the differences lie between the three types of these motors. Now coming to the controllers, why I mentioned about the motor technologies is because we have got the motor controllers for each of those technologies which we saw until now. But my main focus will be on the AC motor controllers, especially the AC motor controllers which are controlling the AC induction motor. The same controller is capable of controlling the permanent magnet AC motors also, but because that's not the field that we are into, so we will restrict our conversation to the AC induction motor. So we have got a large range of AC induction motor controllers, starting from 24 volts 200 amperes up to 144 volts 600 amperes, 650 amperes. So they are going by from one frame size to higher, again higher, and the largest frame size, which is on the bottom right, the 1238 controller. The good thing about the controllers is they employ the same operating system, they employ the same pin configuration. So for the OEMs, it is very easy to replace the controller by still retaining the same wiring and the same software, except for some changes in the mounting of the controller. This is the typical controller, picture in which you can see top three terminals are the U, V, and W motor phase control terminals, power terminals. Then on the bottom side, you have got the power connections coming from the DC. That is the battery side, which is B positive and B negative. On the top right, you have got below top right, you have got two status LEDs. They will blink and in a different pattern for every single fault. You can count the number of blinks and know what fault controller is showing. Refer to the manual, and you know the meaning of the fault, the process of removing or troubleshooting the fault. On the right hand side, there is a connector, 35 pin amp sealed connector, which imparts IP65 ingress protection to the controller. And there are four mounting bolts of M8 size in larger controllers and M6 size in the smaller controllers. Very important here is when you replace the controller in the field, basically, or at the time of manufacturing a equipment, you have to be very careful about what kind of fixtures, hardware that you are using and in what order. The lug has to be placed on a power terminal before anything else. On the top of it, you have to use a, we recommend Schnorr or equivalent washer, which is called a safety washer, a convex water side on the top, so that it holds the bolt tightly against the vibrations of the moving equipment. Tightening torques have to be followed ideally. This is the typical wiring diagram of the controller, but because we also have customized inputs and outputs which can be utilized for to achieve different application requirements through our application layer software called vehicle control language, similar to C language. So we can use those inputs on the left hand side and the outputs which are unnamed. They are basically the generic input outputs which can be employed to achieve a certain purpose or uniqueness or unique features from the same vehicle with the help of application level software. On the right hand side, the thick lines indicate the power circuitry, which shows AC motor with three phases directly connecting to the controller U, V, and W. Then the battery B positive, B negative. B negative does not need any switch gear or fuse in between, but the B positive has to be coming from the main contactor and a power fuse from the battery. Optionally, you can also use the emergency stop or emergency battery disconnect power switch. From there, you take the control line, the logic line, which powers on the logic of the logic side of the logic PCB assembly of the controller. And top right, you have got so many outputs, the coil driver outputs, we call them PWM outputs, digital drivers, where you can, main contactor driver is dedicated to the driver number 1, which is connected at pin number 6. Apart from that, there may be electromagnetic brake on the motor. There may be hydraulic pump contactor on the motor. There may be a load hold contactor on the vehicle. There may be a proportional valve for controlled lowering of the lift. so that ball can be driven, which is current controlled by the controller. Then there are digital drivers which can switch on or off. They are 1 ampere. On the left hand side, you can see emergency reverse input. Inputs go into the controller, basically the forward, reverse, the accelerator pedal input for speed control of the motor and the vehicle. That is called throttle pot. Motor temperature sensor on the left hand side in the middle portion, and on the right hand side middle portion you can see the position encoder, that is the quadrature encoder that we discussed about in the previous slides. Then there is a CAN bus for communicating with different devices, different controllers, instrumentation products, or third-party CAN devices which may be present on the vehicle, like battery management system, which comes by default with a lithium-ion battery, which is also slowly coming into material handling segment. And there is a serial port for communicating with the programmer. Vehicle safety functions we will talk about. Controller employs a dual microprocessor design, which means there is a primary microprocessor and there is a secondary microprocessor. Secondary microprocessor is also called supervisory microprocessor. So it continuously keeps the watch on, all the functions of the controller, whether everything is going as desired. In case of any issues, any faults outside or inside the controller, it will alert the main microprocessor. In addition to main microprocessor's own tracking of the faults. In case of any failure, rare kind of failure with the main microprocessor, the supervisory microprocessor will take control of the vehicle and ensure a fail-safe shutdown. There is a linear drive speed reduction at increasing steering angle. If you have a steering angle feedback going to the controller, then in the straight line you will get the full speed as commanded by the operator. But whenever you are taking a turn on the left side or the right side, the speed will be linearly reduced from the max speed, even if the throttle command, that is the accelerator pedal, is at the full position. So that gives you the safety of, stability of the vehicle during the turn. So there is no toppling of the vehicle in rare case. Then whenever there is a maintenance due or service due, or there is an encoder failure, the performance of the controller is automatically reduced to LOS mode. We call it limited operating strategy, where you can program the max allowable speed and torque. Then in the event of low battery, the low BDI, battery discharge indicator, when the battery has discharged by 80%, so only 20% is left in the battery, which is called the low BDI condition. Then the controller will do the lock out the lift, so operator won't be able to use the lift. If it is a tow truck which does not have a lift, if it is any other machine like platform truck or a golf cart which does not have a lift, then vehicle speed can be cut back by the use of vehicle control language, our application specific software. Temperature control is there using the force cooling and speed cutback, same like the service due and encoder failure. There is a customized, we offer the customized instrument panels on the dashboard so that the operator is aware of all the parameters in real time, the fault situations, fault conditions of the vehicle in front of him. All the alarms, safety alarms, and other conditions are available, icons are available on the cluster instrument panel. Controller has also got itself has got a number of built-in fault detection features which are in the excess of 70 or 75 numbers, apart from the OEM configurable special faults which we provide with the help of VCL. controller does prevent the vehicle from overspeeding on any surface or any slope because of the closed loop, very tight speed control feedback, which comes from the encoder, and the controller follows the speed exactly commanded by the operator. There is no runaway situation possible in case of any kind of failure, that is for sure. Lithium-ion battery protection is possible with the help of CAN communication with the BMS, that is the battery management system module, which comes with a lithium-ion battery. There is a over voltage cutback protection, then under voltage cutback protection, then severe over voltage and severe under voltage shutdown of the vehicle is built into the controller. We just don't offer the controller, we offer the control panels, which comes in the form of this picture like this, on a plate, MS plate or an aluminum plate, on which all the controllers, traction motor controllers, pump motor controller, if there is an electric power steering system, then the steering motor controller also. So they are basically pre-installed on a suitable heatsink with force air cooling. You can see the fans on the top, and the contactors, the main fuse, that is power fuses, input battery, positive, they are fitted on both sides, and there are control fuses, the control wiring, everything is a part of the panel, including the buzzers, a low battery alarm buzzers, reverse relay, fan relay. So this is what this is a typical panel. We have got a large variety of panels, but this is one of the panels which we are offering to our customer, Godrej. As far as maintenance is concerned, actually there is nothing like maintenance to be done as far as our products are concerned by the end user. Do not fiddle with any part of the controller panel assembly. The control panel assembly we call, this is the control panel assembly. So don't fiddle with any part on the panel assembly. Don't replace any part on the panel assembly yourself. Even if there is a failure, there is a problem, there is, for some reason the vehicle has stopped or slowed down, don't do it yourself anything. Consult the nearest material handling MHE service office in case of any issues. I mean the OEM which has provided you the vehicle, supplied you the vehicle. When washing the truck, make sure that there is no water ingress into any electrical or electronic part on the truck, which includes the control panel assembly, the instrument cluster, that is the display on the dashboard, the electric motors, traction motor, hydraulic pump motor, battery, DC to DC converter, etc. Mounting bolts and nuts must be firmly fastened all the time. No part on the panel should be hanging loose from any side or any corner. So this is something. The last point is something that you should at least take care of without consulting the vehicle OEM or their branch office, that at least all the things which are fixed on the panel or on the chassis of the equipment are firmly fastened and mounted at all the time. This is another thing that you can possibly do every 3 months. Remove the whatever dust that accumulates on the panel enclosure every 3 months with a low pressure blower or a vacuum cleaner without disturbing anything on the panel. I mean by anything, I mean mainly the control wiring on the panel. Ensure proper tightness of power cable terminations using the torque wrench in consultation with the OEM. Don't do it yourself. Basically, there will be some preventive or routine maintenance visits from the vehicle OEM. So that's his job to ensure this point, second point, even the first point. In case of any kind of malfunction or any fuse failure, report to the nearest service office of the OEM. Never try to fix any issue yourself unless you have an authorized and trained technician or engineer at your disposal, along with the right tools. All standard material handling trucks are designed for to be used inside the protected covered premises. So it's not recommended to take them out of the premises for any kind of usage, unlike diesel or CNG powered truck. Fuse replacement, never do yourself, because there has to be a reason why a fuse should fail. Whether it is a power circuit fuse or a logic circuit fuse, if it fails, it means there is something definitely wrong somewhere, which needs to be investigated by the OEM's service engineer, resolved, and then only the fuse has to be replaced with the same rating. Which service tools that should be there, carried by the service engineer of the OEM? Connect to the controller. 1314 is basically a PC-based programmer, laptop-based programmer, which connects to the controller, all kinds of Curtis controllers. And you get several screens like this for programming, monitoring, fault diagnosis. The service engineer can pick up the controller's parameter file, send it to us for investigation. If there is anything wrong, we go back to them with some recommendations. He can flash it back into the controller in case of any issues with the vehicle. There is a monitor menu in which you can see the real-time activities of like motor current, motor temperature, controller temperature, throttle command, status of the switch inputs, status of the driver outputs, a lot of things, the vehicle speed. Then we can see the current, that is present faults in the system. Also the faults history of the controller. The controller must have seen some faults in the history when the truck was in operation. So all those faults get recorded in the controller's faults history, which you can see with the help of this programmer. You can do the logging, data logging of the files in terms of from the monitor menu when it comes to troubleshooting a peculiar problem. Parameter files like I said, save CPF file. Help text is available for all OEM parameters in the latest versions of the operating system and the programmer. So it doesn't have to, the service engineer doesn't have to refer to a manual. You can see the meaning of each parameter on the programmer itself, and the respective parameters min max range. Then there is a lower level programmer than the laptop based programmer, which is called 1313. The previous one was 1314, which is PC based. This is a 1313 programmer, which is a colored handheld programmer. We call it HHP. We can do almost all the things like the PC based programmer, but with certain limitations. So this programmer is good enough, actually good enough for most of the minimum level service activities that can be done by the end users by going for a user level programmer. And the person or the assigned engineer to do this activity on the OEM supplied trucks should be trained by the OEM on how to use this programmer. For the service guys from the OEM side, ideally a PC-based programmer should be carried, because in case they need our assistance or the assistance from their own head office, service head office. So if you have a PC-based programmer, which is connected to the system, the controller, and you have got an internet connection, then person sitting away from you can access your the controller through your PC-based programmer and do the fault finding, troubleshooting, and whatnot. Installation tester should be there. These are only the recommended tools with the recommended brands. Digital multimeter or continuity tester for the cables. This lamp load or a 10 ohm 50 watts resistor. They are basically it is good to have in your toolkit to discharge the battery before touching the live terminals on the controller. Torque range should be there when you want to replace the controller or check the tightness of the power terminals on the controller and the main contactors. M8, M6 ranges for mounting, demounting the things, the controller, screwdriver set, cutter, pliers, stripper, all the things which are supposed to be generally a part of a standard service engineer's toolkit. Okay, and the heatsink compound. When you replace the controller, it makes sure that the heatsink compound is applied to the bottom, that is the base plate of the heatsink of the controller before installing it. It is essential for the good and effective, efficient transfer of the heat away from the controller into the thermally conductive metal surfaces like heatsink or aluminum plate or the vehicle chassis. Thank you.
Right.
Hello, Abhishek.
So, yeah, I'm there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Mr. Desai. I think in a short time, you were able to very effectively cover such a broad subject. So I really appreciate this concise way of putting across these pointers, and that too in a very, very simplistic way. Of course,
Thank you.
personally, there were a lot of learnings for me. And I think that will help me in understanding this part of the equipment much better. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I
So-
hope the people, the audience is also able to understand and can ask the questions now.
Right. So we have got a few questions, Mr. Desai. But very interestingly, as compared to other webinars, the questions are slightly limited. Maybe this is not a particular componentry which comes in a day-to-day discussion so much, because it is like once you fit it, it is hardly a maintenance that is required, and that too you very effectively covered. So at a user level, I don't think they have any exposure to controller during the life cycle unless there is some sort of a specific issue related to a controller. So they don't really get across this componentry. So that's why the questions are limited. So we will take whatever questions we have, and then if we are winding up early, so be it. Our timeline is till 4:30, but if we are able to address all questions before that, we will accordingly close the event. So the first question that we have got is that in material handling equipment, like what exactly is the criteria of selecting a particular controller or the build of a controller? I mean, what should a designer look for when he has to select any controller, and what are the broad parameters?
See, the controller selection is to be done by us based on the motor power ratings, characteristic curves, and your target specification, performance specification of the vehicle. Like what would be the max load it would be carrying? What would be the what is going to be the max speed on the flat surface? What's going to be the radiability? What is going to be the stopping and restarting on the gradient, the kind of
Right.
torque in terms of Newton meter that is required, and the
Correct.
corresponding current, corresponding current from the motor would be
Mhm.
dropped, which we
Right.
call as absolute peak current for the application.
Okay.
So these kind of things are required to be filled up by the vehicle designer in a format that we already have in place, and we keep receiving this from Godrej as well as other customers, and
Right.
we do periodically educate them on how to fill these data, and which enables us to choose a most optimum controller, not just a controller but allied products like the main contactor, the power fuse, the control fuse, depending on how many driver load, what is the driver load collectively, digital driver load. So we do refer to all this data. If anything is, inadequate or insufficient, then we uh, call back the concerned person from your design, and we get that pending data and do the final selection. Then we uh, prepare our bill of materials and the recommended wiring schematic, share with the controller, the customer, and that's how we take it forward.
Right. So the next query which has come in is uh, what are the modifications required when the controller has to move in all weather conditions? For example, it has to move out because you mentioned in one of the slides that we should keep the controllers away from water ingress and all that.
Mhm.
So what are the guidelines that you give to OEMs when they are offering or designing equipment for all weather requirements?
For all weather requirements, I will not really consider the sub-zero conditions, the ambient temperature conditions. What I mean is the dusty and the rainy atmosphere, the surroundings, the possibility of vehicle getting exposed to a lot of dust or conductive dust. For example, what you get in some industries where you have a lot of carbon dust. For example,
Right.
in a tire manufacturing industry, or
Correct.
graphite industry, so electrodes industry. So basically, in such cases, the OEM has to take care of enclosing the controller panel, if it is a panel, or if it is a controller alone, then not just the controller but all the parts which are exposed to that kind of environment. They have to be enclosed in a good enclosure, okay, so that there is no impact or interference with the functioning of the controller. Then there are some applications where you have to have you are going in a highly flammable atmosphere, right? Where any kind of electrical contact which produces some kind of arc or a spark is to be prevented. So then you should go for a inflammable panel design or enclosure. So that will protect the controller as well as it will take care of the safety aspects. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Are
Hello.
you?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible now.
Yes.
There
Yes.
was a small.
Sorry. Yeah, there was a technical glitch. I was thrown out of Teams platform. So I'm just keeping my camera off just to protect some bandwidth. Uh,
Yes, yes, yes.
right. So yeah, I got your point. I think audience also understood the answer. The next
Mhm.
question is very interesting. It says that controllers seem to be, I'm just sort of reading out verbatim so that you get the crux of the question. The
Mhm.
controllers seem to be electromechanical assembly. Then why these cannot be repaired? Why is it that every time there is a issue in a controller,
Mhm.
the full controller replacement is recommended?
Mhm.
Uh, So that is a specific query. So if you could throw
First of
some
all,
light on that.
yes, first of all, controller is not a electromechanical unit. It's a purely electronic unit.
Mhm.
It is basically, there is nothing that is like a moving part inside the controller. It's fully state-of-the-art, high technology semiconductors based control unit. And second thing is that it may be repairable as if it is a DC motor controller, because we do have a facility in Pune to repair the DC motor controllers, but we do not do the components level repair. We do the PCB assembly level replacement. Like if there is a problem in the logic PCB assembly, we will replace the logic PCB. If it is a power assembly, we will replace the power assembly, and then we have to do a lot of calibration, tuning of the controller, okay, and test it thoroughly so that it performs like a brand new controller. That's why we give the same amount of warranty on a repaired controller as good as a new controller. The controller looks like, maybe old, with the casing would be old, but from inside the whole assemblies will be swapped or replaced with the latest revision new boards cards.
Okay.
But in case of the AC motor controllers, we don't have any repairing facility, because we don't expect failures unless there is some exceptional case where the controller could not protect itself in the event of some abnormal catastrophic short circuit or something like that during the running operation of the vehicle. But otherwise, if you see the controller failure rate as far as AC controllers are concerned, it is less than 0.4 or 0.3% today.
Right.
So
Right.
that's why there is no need for us so far. We have never realized any need to invest into a full-fledged repairing capability for the AC motor controllers.
Right. So this question is not asked by anybody, but this is my follow-through question to what you have just explained, Mr. Desai.
Hmm.
Uh, why does a controller conk off? Like whenever we say that in some cases we hear from service engineer the controller has conked off or it has blown. What
Hmm.
can be the possible reasons for controller to blow off, and how can users or customers protect themselves against such situations?
See, that happens in your case. Suppose I am receiving, say, 20 failed controllers, 20 units or 25 units of failed controllers every year. Then out of those 25, 20 numbers have failed because of the improper characterization with the motor, incorrect tuning with the motor, and they are coming from, they are of the same type number. They are coming from mostly from the same equipment. So we have also done the engineering failure analysis of those controllers. So that creates a picture in the minds of everybody that the controllers are failing, right? So those are those controllers which are coming back to us because of the improper tuning of the motor, or flashing of an incorrect software in the controller which is not tuned for that particular motor.
Okay. And how can that be avoided, if I may ask?
Yeah, we are working with your design and quality people, and we have taken a lot of measures in order to avoid those kind of incidences. And we can see the improvement unless some failures which are returning to us from the field, from some equipment which were sold in the past. But since last 6 months or 8 months or so, we don't see the recurrence of such failures.
Right. So if I hear you correctly, that this failure mainly happens at the tuning stage. So
Yes.
once the equipment is in operation, and if the controllers are working fine, the possibility of it conking off is very minimal. Am I
Yeah.
understanding that correctly?
No. In fact, if there is a mistuned motor, problem of tuning with the motor, improper characterization or tuning, using of a wrong software, the controller will still pass your all standard production tests. Controller will go with the equipment in the field. When it will fail, it will be only a matter of time. It may fail after a week, it may fail after 1 month, it may fail after 2 months, but it is guaranteed to fail in due course of time.
Right. Okay. Now, for certain cases, I mean, you have very categorically said that users should not fiddle with the controllers. They should always call OEMs for looking at any controller related issues. The only, I think, one or two things that you mentioned is that if there are any loose bolts and all that, that is something that people can check and tighten it. Nothing beyond that at a user level. Everything else has to be done by the OEM.
Yes,
So, yeah,
also the user, sorry to interrupt you, also the user can do some amount of, removal of the accumulated dust by using
okay,
the low pressure blowers without actually affecting anything in the controller enclosure.
right, right. So apart from this, there is nothing that is recommended to be done as a daily activity or a daily
Not
checkpoint
at,
for the users.
yes, absolutely.
Right. So one more question which has come in is in terms of cold storages.
Mhm.
Like when equipment are offered in cold storages, do controller characteristics or selection also undergoes a change?
No, nothing, not at all. See, controllers are rated to work in the ambience starting from minus 40 degrees
Okay. Minus
Celsius.
40.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. And
yeah.
a plus also, of course, in India, temperatures can go up to plus 45, plus nearer to 50 also.
Up to plus 50 degrees, there should not be a problem. And we have taken adequate, more than adequate care in terms of providing the, managing the heat dissipation of the controller in terms of uh, using the powerful heat sinks and force air cooling uh, in the, bigger applications like forklifts.
Right. Right. The next question, Mr. Desai, which has come in is in terms of heavy duty applications like long cycles. For
Mhm.
example, in bottling plants, in season time when trucks are running 24/7, literally.
Mhm.
So, what sort of checkpoints are there for controllers? Like, are there any, or it doesn't matter, whatever be the duty
No,
cycle?
it does not matter. Does not matter unless and until there is a slowdown of the vehicle or a shutdown of a vehicle, and the controller is giving you the over temperature fault. Okay, thermal
Right.
cutback fault. Unless and until that situation arises, you don't have to really worry about anything, even if it is a round the clock application.
Right. Right.
The cooling fans have to be, running perfectly.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
So the next question which has come in is that there is a trend which is available or visible in every aspect, like batteries. People are talking moving lead acid to lithium ion, from diesel power to electrical equipment. There's a lot of absorption which is happening. So similar to this, is there any trend observed in controllers? Like today we are talking about this type of controllers, maybe 5 years down the line we are looking at something else. Any trends in controller?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, from this platform, which is called E-Series controllers.
Mhm.
Right now, whatever controllers we are supplying to you are called E-Series controllers. So we have already started introducing the next generation, which is the F-Series
Okay.
controllers. They
Okay.
are basically, they take a lot of, they have inherited a lot of things from the existing controller in
Right.
terms of the power base of the controller. But the logic core is totally different. It is completely redesigned with the latest generation microcontrollers. They are very fast. They are fully CAN bus compatible controllers. There is no serial bus in those controllers. A very different type of tool set is required in order to communicate with the controller, and they are different, but we are slowly introducing these controllers, F series controllers, to Godrej also. So they will be coming now.
Okay. Okay.
They are more compact, more efficient,
Right.
slightly more efficient.
Okay. So the next question which has come in is that it is something that is picked from your presentation, that there was a mention about lithium-ion battery protection through BMS. There is a request for certain elaboration on this point, because customers who are going in for lithium-ion battery, what is it that this feature is talking about? Lithium-ion battery protection through BMS.
Yeah, I will tell you. See, lead acid batteries are the most fault tolerant batteries. Nothing goes wrong suddenly. Whenever there is a overcurrent spike, there is a over voltage caused by a suddenly incoming spike from the regenerative braking, or sudden dip in the battery voltage. In case of lithium ion, they are very sensitive. Unless and until you manage this battery chemistry well, they are good. They have to be managed very well. So that's why those batteries come with a battery management system which monitors the voltage, the temperature, and the current of all the cells, not just the overall pack of the battery. And it knows essentially. So BMS takes care of all the things. But if the BMS is communicating any abnormalities related with the lithium ion battery with the controller, any fault situations to the controller with respect to the batteries, any high cell voltage or low cell voltage, or high cell temperature or low cell temperature messages, it keeps sending to the controller, motor controller, via CAN bus. We can configure the controller to take the necessary precautions without causing a accidental shutdown of the vehicle. When it is in usage, we can do the speed reduction, we can do the performance reduction of the vehicle, rather than having to see a sudden stoppage of the vehicle in the middle of some work.
Right. Right. Got it. So the next question which has come in is that like, are repaired controllers also supplied in the industry? And like, what is a typical life of a repaired controller?
See, the life of a new controller is designed, any Curtis controller is designed to outlast the life of an equipment. Okay. And the repair controller will give you the same performance as a new controller.
Okay.
That is about the DC motor controller. I'm not talking about AC motor controllers, which are not repairable in the first place.
Okay.
So definitely you can expect the same life even from a repaired controller, if it is installed correctly, programmed correctly, wired correctly in the equipment, after rectification of the root cause of the problem which caused the controller to fail in the first place.
Right. So the next question which has come in is, how much electrical power does a controller consume in the entire electric circuitry of any MHE? Is there a percentage figure that you can tell, or a number?
When the vehicle is not in operation, the main kind of contactor is off, if only the logic power is on, then the quiescent current, which is drawn by the controller, is hardly a few 10 or 20 milliamperes. And during the operation, the efficiency of the controller is in the excess of 95%.
Right, 95. Okay. So I think this is so far the last question. What are you also mentioned about certain fault detection features of controllers? So there's a request for a certain elaboration on that. What sort of faults are detected and how?
See, there are a lot of faults related with the throttle input, the digital inputs, the driver outputs, if there is any short circuit, if there is any open circuit, if there is any overcurrent, if there is any overload, or if there is any problem with the motor or the encoder or the motor's temperature sensor or the battery, if there is severe over voltage or over voltage, or if there is under voltage or severe over voltage. So all kind of these faults have got a built-in checks and the detection inside the controller. And in the event of any such fault arising, the controller will either shut down, or if the fault is not fatal, then controller will at least warn the user or the operator to stop and take care of the fault in order to resolve it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, Mr. Desai, we are at the end of the questions that we have received. As I mentioned, this time the number of questions are slightly on a lower side. So as I mentioned, because maybe people are not interacting with controller as much as they would be interacting with the full machine or maybe with the batteries and chargers of the system. So, but anyways, I think there were a lot of takeaways for all the attendees who were present in this session, especially as I mentioned for me as well. And I thank you profusely for being a part of this session. And if there are any follow-through questions which come up post this event, we would request your kind help towards responding to those questions if we get any.
Definitely,
So,
Abhishek ji. In fact, I am also very thankful and grateful to you for giving us an opportunity to conduct this session, and we are always there for you in case of any questions, any queries, any support that you ever need. We are instantly available for you.
thank you so much, Mr. Desai. That's very reassuring. Before we close this event, once again, we request all the attendees to please fill up the feedback form, telling us how did they feel about this particular event, and also mentioning if they want us to cover any particular topic in forthcoming sessions. With that, we bring this event to a closure 15 minutes before the scheduled time. But I think everybody would sort of like that part that we are having that 15 minutes extra available for everybody else to catch up on their work. So thank you so much and see you in the next webinar. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. I'm disconnecting. Thank you so
Yeah.
much once again. Yeah,
Thank
bye
you.
bye.